Okay, so you should be on page 8 in your foldable. If you need to stop the video to find page 8, then you can do so. We just talked about in the foldable that we created what it means for numbers to be consecutive. That means they need to be in a row, like 5 and 6 are together in a row, or 10, 11, 12 are in a row. So in this problem, it tells the sum. Well, first of all, you need to know that the sum means to add. And it tells you 2 consecutive integers. That means 2 numbers that are in a row, side by side, is 57. So I would draw 2 blanks because you know you have 2 numbers. And it says the sum, so we're adding those 2 numbers. The sum is 57. We need to know what are those 2 numbers. You can guess and check, but part of the point in this is that we actually write the equation. I usually use n, just because n stands for number, or you could use x or a or any variable. But if we say that the first number is n, to get to the next number, we would add 1. So our first number is n. To get to the next number, it would be n plus 1. Because in our foldable, we just talked about, for example, the numbers 3 and 4. If my starting number is 3, we call it n. To get to 4, we would add 1 to that n value. So that's just an example, just a reminder of what you just saw in that foldable. So we're starting with some number. To get to the very next number, we would add 1 to it. And it's supposed to equal 57. So now you have an equation. So we're going to combine like terms. So 2 n's. 1 does not have a like term. Equals 57. So again, you're still solving your equation, so you're going to move 1 over. So we have 2n equals 56. To finish this problem, we're going to divide by 2, and that gives us the n equals 28. So if your first value is 28, if you add 1 to that, your second value is going to be 29. So what are those 2 answers? 28 and 29. Now we'll look at example 6. This time it tells us specifically that we have odd integers. So whatever your answers are, they should be odd numbers. But again, we're talking about 2 numbers, and we're talking about the sum. So we're going to add 2 numbers. Those 2 numbers, when we add them up, is supposed to be 56. They are consecutive, so they must be in a row. For example, if we're talking about odd numbers, that could be 21 plus 23, or 35 plus 37, but they have to be 2 odd numbers in a row. So in our foldable that we just created, we can still call your first number n, or x, or whatever you want to call it. But if we look at odd numbers, for example, 3 and 5, if we're calling 3 your n value, how did you get to 5? Well, you had to add 2 to it. So our first value we're going to call n. To get to the very next odd number, we're just going to add 2 to that number. So now we have an equation. In this equation, to solve it, we're going to combine our like terms. So n plus n is 2n. Bring down your 2 equals 56. Our like terms are 2 and 56, so I'm going to move the 2. And I have 2n equals 54. So when I divide by 2, I should get that n is 27. That is my first odd number. If my numbers are consecutive, that means they are in a row. So my first value is 27. My second value, if I'm counting by odd numbers, would be 29. So my two answers, 27 and 29. The last example we have two more examples. Example 7. Again, it tells you we're adding two consecutive numbers, but this time it says that it's less than 56. So let's go ahead and draw our blanks. Instead of saying equal to 56, it says that it has to be less than 56. So in other words, 56 is the biggest number that it could be. So we're going to have an inequality instead of an equal sign. So we're going to say that our first value is n. It does not say that they are even or odd. It's just two numbers that are in a row. So to get from the first number to the very next number, we're just going to add 1 to that number. So we're going to solve this inequality. We're going to solve it just like an equation. N plus n is 2n. Bring everything else down. And now we can continue solving it by moving the 1 over. 2n is less than 55. So when I divide by 2, that's going to give me 27 and a half. Now obviously 27 and a half is not a whole number. I know that my two numbers must be less than 56. So what if we bump that down to 27? Because we don't want the decimal. So if we round it down to 27, the very next number would be 28. So let's test it. We're saying if those are our two numbers. 27 plus 28 is 55. Is 55 less than 56? Yes. So what is my answer? My answer, my two numbers, I know I'm squeezing this in here. My two answers are 27 and 28. How do you know that? All right, let's go back. You had 27 and a half is what we found when we got our answer. What if we would have rounded up to 28? So if we're saying 28 is my first number, my next number will be 29. If I add those two numbers, 28 plus 29, I get 57. But if we test it, was 57 less than 56? No. So I know that my two numbers cannot be 28 and 29. They must be 27 and 28. You're actually not going to see inequality today, but that's a good opportunity for us to go ahead and talk about that. We have one more example. Example 8. It says a student makes an 80 and a 60 on the first two exams. The student must keep at least a 78 average for his parents to let him keep driving to school. What grade must he make on the third exam to keep his average at least above a 78? So in this problem, we know that there are going to be 3 grades. We know that one of his grades is an 80. We know that another grade is a 60. And we do not know that last test score. So we'll just call it N or X or whatever you want to call it. Now, if we're talking about averages, to find the average, you add up all of your numbers and divide by however many numbers you have. Well, we're going to have 3 numbers. Right now we just know 2 of them, but we will have 3 numbers because it says there will be 3 tests. So we're finding the average of the test grades. It says that he has to keep his average at least above a 78. So in other words, 78 is the lowest. Don't get confused about the inequality. That's really not the important thing right now. We just want you to be able to set up the equation and solve it. So in this equation, before I can figure out what N is, I must get rid of this 3. So you can use a hide and seek chart if you want to, but what's going on is we are dividing by 3. So we're going to do the opposite, and we're going to multiply by 3 on both sides. So these 3's cancel, and I'm left with 80 plus 60 plus that last test score that we do not know yet. On the other side, 3 times 78 is 234. This one's different because it's talking about us having to find another test score, and we're talking about averages. So now it's just an equation we're going to have to solve. I have like terms. 80 plus 60 should be 140. You still have N, and you have 234. So be thinking ahead about what your next step would be. So 234 minus 140 so N has to be greater than 94. Notice we're not saying that his test grade has to be exactly a 94, but it has to be at least a 94. It really needs to be higher than a 94 in order for his average to stay above a 78. So our final answer is that N is greater than 94. At this point, if you are ready for the practice sheet, you can raise your hand and tell me. If you need help at any point, make sure that you raise your hand and tell me, and I'll be glad to help you.